Greetings, my fellow Streamless Southern Thinkers. It's LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date, Wednesday, May 31st, 2017. Yes. And tomorrow, the Atlantic Ocean, the official hurricane season will begin, which is June 1st, and end through November 30th. Well, let's see how many people will wig out during that time. Tropical storms coming, it's going to be a hurricane. Run to the hills. I love the exploited manifestation. Yeah, I was just checking on the article, reading some of the articles about what happened in Orlando. And they shut the entire airport down, got all swarm of cops. Looks like the person's a very distorted figure, according to some of the articles, and it was a toy gun. Wow. It was strange enough to try to use the Esteban Santiago case. And when they said he couldn't, the whole TSA let him put it in his case and all that, I'm like, didn't make any sense at all. Because remember one thing, my friends, Florida and the terminals is still a firearm-free zone. So you know what? Don't give me that malarkey. But it is very strange indeed. Shut the whole entire airport down. Wow. It's like sometimes it's ways, in my views, there's other ways of detaining and let the progress flow instead of doing like a school drill. Yeah, more the fear factor, I would say. The boogeyman syndrome. He has a firearm. Run to the hills. Yep. That's just my view on those areas, in that area. And of course, CNN, Counterfeit News Network, is still talking about Russian tides and Trump. It's like watching Yippee Yappy Yahoo! Huey and Dewey. Real pathetic. Absolutely. You're talking to a man, once again, I'm not a Trump lover, supporter, or worshiper. Don't assume I watch Fox News or read Daily Signal, get my source of information. It's not going to fly. Well, enough of that. Just had another lunch at Whole Foods Market in Fort Lauderdale along 20th Street and US 1, Northeast 20th Street. Yeah, come here for years, even though it's corporate. But met some good folks here. You've always been courteous to me, so I just stop in here once in a blue moon. But always endorse the mom paws. So just to let you guys know. Yeah, so we've been keeping tabs what's been happening in the Middle East, even with that $100 billion agreement with Saudi Arabia. What the United States and Saudi did. Very disturbing, I would say. And we're going to use some of that input. And this one here from newsbuds.com. And I am a proud member of this network. They're very good. They're consistent. They don't use the partisan paradigm or left-right scenario. Just chase it right down the middle and examine everything that's around. So if you have a chance, check them out. It's like you can do a monthly, yearly. So you won't be disappointed. Newsbuzz.com. So Kurt Nemo's in there now. Kurt Nemo is in there for a while. He's from InfoWars. Very good editor and writer, reporter. So the first thing I'm going to check in here. And it's mainly a good amount of it's about the Middle East, what's been happening in that whole entire region. So There's other stuff I'll be talking about as well, but this is the main topic will be on that area. So it'll be, the Middle East conflict expands. Yeah, possible expansion, I would say. So let's check this out. Kurt Nemo wrote on here. New York Times makes case for killing children in Yemen. All right, it's a Newsblood exclusive. Newsblood exclusive, exactly. So as it reads, on May 23rd, naval SEALs attack the hamlet of Al-Adlan in the Yemeni province of Marib. U.S. commandos attack helicopters and an AC-130 gunship converged on a village and killed 7 people, described by the New York Times as members of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. According to Reprieve, a London-based human rights organization, 5 civilians were killed in what the Times and the Pentagon described as an Al-Qaeda compound located deep within the Yemeni countryside. Iona Craig, writing for The Intercept, says the village residents gave a list of 10 names of civilians killed and wounded during the raid. 15-year-old Abdul Saeed Salim al-Adhal was shot dead as he fled from his home with women and children. Another child, 12-year-old Ahmed Mohammed Salih al-Adhal, was injured but survived. The Pentagon described the raid as a success. Operations such as this provide insight into AQAP's disposition, capabilities, and intentions, which allows the U.S. to continue to pursue, disrupt, and degrade AQAP. The Defense Department reported on May 23rd, citing the Central Command news release. AQAP has taken advantage of ungoverned spaces in Yemen to plot, direct, and inspire terror attacks against America, its citizens, and allies around the world, the release said. Okay, The Times echoed the Pentagon narrative even after the rise of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. American counterterrorism officials have said the Al-Qaeda franchise in Yemen poses the most direct threat to the United States, largely because of its proven ability to develop plots to smuggle hard-to-detect bombs aboard passenger airliners bound for the United States. So far, 3 such plots have been thwarted. This is in reference to the October 29, 2010 cargo plane bomb plot allegedly masterminded by Anar al-Awlaki, a Yemeni Amman born in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Al-Awlaki died at the Pentagon in months after the 9/11, despite an FBI interview at the same time about his contacts with Noraf al-Hazim, Khalid al-Madar, and Hani Hajor, 3 men said to be 9/11 hijackers. News reports claim 2 packages containing a bomb consisting of 300 to 400 grams of plastic explosives and a detonating mechanism were found on a separate U.S.-bound Emirati cargo planes on a non-stop over in Dubai following a tip-off from Saudi intelligence. The United Arab Emirates Civil Aviation Authority, however, rejected the claim. The Emirates plane that arrived today in the United States from Dubai did not contain any packages from Yemen. The official Emirati WAM news agency quoted an unnamed source with the country's civil aviation body as saying, according to Press TV, out of abundance of caution, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, diverted 2 Canadian CF-18s from the 425 Tactical Fighter Squadron out of Canadian Forces Base Bagotville, Quebec, to track a civilian aircraft determined to be an aircraft of interest as it flew into and over Canadian airspace. The civilian aircraft was passed to 2 U.S. F-15s from the 104th Fighter Wing at Barnes Air National Guard Base, Massachusetts, as it transited into U.S. airspace to its ultimate destination at JFK Airport, where it landed without incident, a press release issued by NORAD stated on October 29, 2010. Other attacks blamed on Al-Qaeda in Yemen include a 2009 Christmas Day attempt underwear bombing of an airline in Detroit, and later the 2015 attack on the French satirist newspaper Charlie Hebdo that killed 12 in Paris. A passenger on Northwest Flight 253, Kurt Haskell, raised questions about Omar Abdul-Muttalib, the alleged bomber, and portrayed the incident as a false flag. The incidents have provided the United States with a further pretext for military involvement in Yemen. The events of the past 24 hours underscore the necessity of remaining vigilant against terrorism. President Obama said today, after the disputed cargo bomb plot, the American people should be confident that we will not waver in our resolve to defeat Al-Qaeda and its affiliates and to root out violent extremism in all its forms. The following year, the United States granted permission from Saudi Arabia to construct a secret CIA drone base. Prior to this, the U.S. conducted drone attacks inside Yemen from Djibouti, and the Cyclus drone strikes in Yemen began in 2002. The facility was established to hunt for members of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is based in Yemen. The BBC reported 2 years later a drone flown from there was used in September 2011 to kill Anwar al-Awlaki, a U.S.-born cleric who was alleged to be AQAP's external operations chief. The CIA and the American Special Forces also established a command center in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, and from there coordinated drone attacks and airstrikes with conventional aircraft. There were 10 times more airstrikes in the Cold War on Terror during Obama's presidency than under his predecessor, George W. Bush, reports the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. A total of 563 strikes, largely by drones, target Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen during Obama's 2 terms, compared to 57 strikes under Bush. Between 384 and 807 civilians were killed in those countries, according to reports logged by the Bureau. The actual number, however, is far larger. In 2016, the UK-based group Airwords estimated at minimum 1,660 civilians have been killed so far. For years and years now, we've been fed this line by the military that they don't kill civilians, that our weapons are so smart, we only kill the bad guys. Airwords director Chris Woods told the Washington Spectator that's just not true. It's not borne out by the data. President Trump embraced the drone war upon entering office and also stepped up special forces raids. In April, he ordered 70 airstrikes in Yemen within a 1-month period, and as a result, its civilian casualties have driven dramatically. The number of airstrikes more than doubled the number for all of 2016. Within days of taking office, Trump ordered a raid on a small village in Al-Galil, a village in the Yakla area of the Al-Baida province in central Yemen. More than 30 civilians, including 8-year-old American girl and a pregnant woman, were killed by the special forces during the nighttime raid. U.S. gunships hit more than a dozen buildings and killed more than 120 goats, sheep, and donkeys. The U.S. House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said during a briefing that the raid was highly successful. The establishment media downplayed civilian deaths and focused on the death of Chief Petty Officer William Ryan Owens and the wounding of 3 other SEALs. Spicer said that anyone critical of the raid owes an apology to the Navy SEAL who was killed. While the New York Times does not mention in passing the death of civilians during Trump's latest raid, it concentrates primarily on the wounded members of the Navy SEAL elite. Elite SEAL Team 6, and the dubious intelligence gathered after the raid. These missions are intended to provide the American military with more information about the Al-Qaeda leadership and operations, as well as insights in other extremist groups in the country, the Times reports. The Central Command statement said the raid was conducted with support of the beleaguered Yemeni government, which had been fighting a two-front war, one with Arab allies against Houthi rebels in the western part of the country, and another against Qaeda militants in the country's central and eastern regions. Donald Trump's recent visit to Saudi Arabia signals U.S. involvement in the Yemen war will increase exponentially. Saudi Arabia is a vassal state and does not engage in military hostilities without express permission of the United States. The war against the Houthis in Yemen is a proxy war against Iran. Although Iran has a little influence over the Zaydi Shia-led religious political movement, Trump and his generals have made confronting Iran the centerpiece of U.S. foreign policy. Left out of the discussion and reportage by the New York Times, the rest of the propaganda media is a fact. Iran tried to prevent the Houthis from continuing their war against government forces loyal to Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi, the former president of the country who fled to Saudi Arabia on the day the Saudis began the brutal bombing of the country. In August 2015, Obama admitted Iran had tried to dial back the advance of the Houthis. When the Houthis started moving, that wasn't on orders from Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That wasn't on an order from the IRGC. He said there was an expression of the traditional Houthi antagonism towards Sana'a and some of the machinations of the former president Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was making common cause out of expediencies with the Houthis. There were moments where Iran was actually urging potential restraint. So based on this, Iran is caught in the middle. And plus, they're trying to prevent this from happening. Okay? And another thing, too, about these raids, because of Qatar and all that, is to me is completely irrelevant. They're trying to beat this nation down to the ground. How come I don't hear people going up in arms on this? This is what the one world order wants, to control everything in that region, including the sons of bitches in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. If people get offended, too bad. I don't care. You may have your loose screws in Yemen, but you're going to do these raids and claim it's fighting terrorism. It's nothing more than a bald-faced deception. This is just part of what's being addressed and what's to come, my friends. This is nothing more than conquering the Middle East region and beyond, including interconnecting with Eurasia to fulfill, in my view, Zbigniew Brzezinski's legacy in the book, The Grand Chessboard. I know I repeat this many times. Forgive me on that. Too many discrepancies. Who cared about the civilians? But we'll just get the people that went to raid. We'll pay homage to them. You accept it? You want imperialism? You want your tax dollars to feed the empire? Or you want to bring all your brothers and sisters home that are serving? Get them out of these bases. You want your funds going to these covert wars. This is just part of the pie here. And this is a good article, and this is a real disturbing one. Making all these excuses, patsies, and all that. So, next one here, we'll continue on. Came from the Asia Times, and it says here, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, open crack in united front against Iran. See, he's starting to interconnect here. This is by Sami Morbayad. And as it reads, a nasty war of words was broken out between two bittersweet allies and economic heavyweights in the Persian Gulf. Beneath a veneer of normality, Qatar and Saudi Arabia are reft by animosity and rivalry, which surfaced last week after Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, visited Saudi Arabia. In meetings involving the heads of government of Muslim countries, including the Saudi king and U.S. President Donald Trump, Sheikh Tamim called Iran a force of stability. At the Riyadh summit, heads of governments appear to agree to keep Iran in political and economic quarantine. Even though Iran and Qatar have a strong relationship, they also appear to agree to try to counter the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is blacklisted in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Egypt, but has a privileged status in Qatar, the chief ideologue of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yasif al-Qaradai is celebrated in Doha. He has unparalleled direct access to the Emir and Emir's father and predecessor Hamad bin Khalifa al-Thani. If left unchecked, the road could open up big rifts in obscenity by United Gulf Cooperation Council, eventually perhaps affecting the price of oil and prompting the rivals to settle old scores in the battlefields in Yemen, Libya, and Syria. U.S. Secretary of Defense Secretary James Mattis warned Qatar that maintaining its relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood might be costly, and that Trump was considering classifying the organization as a terrorist group. The Qataris ignored the warning and refused to sever their ties with the Egyptian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, which the Egyptian armed forces removed from power in a coup d'etat 3 years ago. Qatar is also a generous patron of the Syrian and Palestinian branches of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Emir of Qatar is no fanatic, but used the Muslim Brotherhood to increase its leverage in Arab politics. We say one world order funded Muslim Brotherhood. Yep. The Emir of Qatar left the summit meetings in Riyadh dissatisfied and upset. He had expected Trump to begin his tour of the Middle East in Doha rather than Riyadh, and also acknowledged the new status that Qatar has attained. For years, the Emir and his family have been spending billions of dollars trying to make Qatar a champion of modernity and the herald of change in the Arab world. Discovery of huge gas reserves turned Qatar from one of the most obscure countries in the world into one of the wealthiest, wielding political clout and exerting economic influence well beyond the Gulf. Qatar will put on the Soccer World Cup in 2022. It has been set up the Qatar Education Foundation, which has put satellite campuses of U.S. universities such as Carnegie Mellon and Georgetown in Doha. In 1991, Qatari forces took part of the U.S.-led military campaign to reverse Iraqi expansionism, contributing to the liberation of the Saudi Arabian city of Qajafi from Iraqi occupation. Qatar now contains the biggest U.S. military base outside the U.S., where 10,000 servicemen and women are stationed. 2 days after his return from Riyadh, Emir made a speech at the military ceremony, which was broadcast on a state-run television. He spoke of his excellent relations with Iran, describing the Iranians as stabilizers of the region who cannot be ignored. The Emir disputed the implication of the U.S. position at the Riyadh summit, saying nobody has a right to accuse them of terrorism just because they declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group, or because they are not ready to tolerate kind of resistance embraced by Hamas and Hezbollah. And he took a swipe at Saudi Arabia, saying the real danger lies in the behavior of certain governments which have bred terrorism themselves by adopting an extreme version of Islam. Wahhabite, yeah, that's it. Soon after the recording of the speech was removed from the website on a state-run television station, the Qatari government denied that the Emir has said what he said. The government asserted that the website had been hacked to make it seem the Emir uttered words he never uttered. Yet the recording of the speech also appeared on the Qatar news agency Instagram account. Saudi Arabia responded to Emir's words by having its news media smear him. Al Arabiya television broadcast a report that the U.S. forces that killed Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden found documents in bin Laden's home in Pakistan which showed a direct link between Al-Qaeda and Qatar. Newspaper Okaz accused of Qatar of siding with enemies of the nation and fiercely attacked Al Jazeera, the international broadcaster backed by the Qatari royal family. Al Jazeera has often been accused of being a channel for Al-Qaeda propaganda, especially after it was the first television station to broadcast bin Laden's speech, claiming credit for the attack on New York and Washington in 2001. In the past week, Egypt and UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia have all blocked broadcasts by Al Jazeera and other Qatari television stations. All four countries also have withdrawn their ambassador from Qatar. Showing no inclination to mend broken bridges, the Emir of Qatar telephoned Iranian President Hassan Rouhani to congratulate him on his re-election. The telephone call set alarm bell ringing throughout the Arabian Peninsula. It opened cracks in the United Front, the Arab world, which has been trying to present to Iran cracks with the Iranian government, is sure try to widen. So it looks like there's a little bit more friction is going on here. Like, you can talk to that person, you can't talk to them. That's how they see it. It's more like who can control who. And of course, a lot of areas too that Qatar was involved was like playing double dealing. They even claimed that they were involved funding ISIS as well. They're like playing like saying double side, like the double-headed coin. That would be the best way that I can describe it. So it looks like they're all now making an excuse of possibly taking Iran and playing this little flip-flopping game here. So just got to keep your eyes and ears on that. That's one thing you have to really pay attention to. It's just like, so what the whole thing is, they're going to try to really get a full-fledged war going on to expand it, possibly into Iran. So speaking of that, we'll just see what it has to say here from the activist post. Shifting the blame, how U.S. made Iran responsible for 9/11. This is by Eric Zuzzi. So as it reads, the official U.S. government line is that Iran is the main country responsible for 9/11 attacks in America. On 9th of March 2016, a U.S. civil court ruled that Iran must pay to some victims of 9/11 attacks $1.5 billion in fines. The Obama administration had no comment. So the U.S. press ignored the verdict almost totally. But the verdict was the only official U.S. court ruling thus about state sponsorship of the 9/11 attacks. 16 years after the event, it was therefore huge news on March 9th of March 2016. It created a precedent for the U.S. government to allege that Iran had caused the 9/11 attacks and is consequently the number one terrorist state, as the Israelis have long claimed. But it received very little coverage at the time. And it's interesting. I can still check this out. That's from WashingtonBlog.com too. Oh yeah, that is interesting. Yep, that does have merit. $10.5 billion in fines. Iran refused to pay. Interesting. So there's another reason why they be focusing on attacking Iran, okay, just to pay that certain debt. So, as it says here, it was therefore huge news on March 9, 2016. It created precedent for the U.S. government to allege that the cause of Iran. I think I already said that. Very little coverage of time. The event's significance was the president that this verdict set, but the news media simply didn't report this important precedent. It was the first official U.S. governmental conclusion alleged that Iran had, in effect, invaded America on September 11 September 2001. And yet, even now, no one is saying that Iran invaded the U.S. on 9/11 because the U.S. government isn't yet trying to prepare the public to support an invasion of Iran by American forces. Still, this president could become the start of such preparation if neither of America's Iran-hating allies, Israel and or Saudi Arabia, can be induced to invade. President Trump, on May 20th, advanced toward the possibility of invading Iran long away when he announced a record-shattering $350 billion sale of U.S.-made weapons to Saudi Arabia, and the White House said this package of defense equipment and services supported long-term security of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf region in the face of Iranian threats. The symbolism here was that Saudi Arabia is America's ally and that Iran is America's enemy. The stage is set. In the case, a U.S. president that will want to take that stage. President Trump on April 5th, 2017 was asked in a Super Bowl television interview what if his policies would be regarded by Iran, and he answered, they have total disregard of our country. They are the number one terrorist state. And he was running for the U.S. presidency in 2016. He had spoken only about Saudi Arabia's role on the World Trade Center and the attack. That's very serious stuff. It's sort of nice to know who your friends are and perhaps who your enemies are. But now that he was president of the U.S. president, and his biggest initial American jobs achievement already in the works during his presidency start will be an all-time record high $350 billion sale of U.S.-made weapons to the Saudis. Trump, as president, had mentioned the Saudis only as allies, no longer as supporters of terrorism. He's like him and Mitt Romney are probably butt buddies for all I know, allegedly speaking. All the information that's known about Iran's actual role in 9/11 is contained in the judge's 22nd December 2011 Find the Facts and Conclusion of Law in the civil court case, when the judge stated solely upon the basis of the research the law firm for the suing American victims set forth. Basically, what their case came due is that some of the 9/11 hijackers have traveled through Iran prior to 9/11. Among those finding of facts and conclusions of law, there were no allegations of evidence to prove Iran had participated in the planning of the 9/11 attacks, nor of any Iranians paying of any of the hijackers. However, one anti-government Iranian named Mashbahai referred to the flight simulator that maybe had been purchased from Iran and he was alleged to have said that he believed that the simulator was probably used to train the 9/11 hijackers' pilots. That's all. For these things, the judge fined the Iranian government $10.5 billion. He told the suing victims to get the money any way they could, which might be not at all, since Iran mocked and rejected the verdict. But the president for Iran 9/11, Iran calls 9/11 was set. What then? The reality of Iran and the 9/11 attacks? Even the civil suit claimants didn't allege anything substantial for period prior to 9/11. But what about the period since 9/11? On 23rd of May 2013, FBI agent Daniel A. Mahako was honored by the U.S. Military School of Advanced Military Studies for writing the best monograph of the AOASF, that school's program, at this 104th 104-page study titled Iran's Post 9/11 Grand Bargain Missed the Opportunity for Strategic Rapprochement Between Iran and the United States. Its abstract and conclusion said, the events of 9/11 provided an unprecedented opportunity for a strategic rapprochement between the United States and Iran. After 9/11, Iran not only denounced the attack and cooperated with the United States and Afghanistan, but also offered to negotiate a comprehensive resolution of differences and with no preconditions. The failure to recognize the impact of the 1953 coup on Iran's collective identity as subsequent policy decisions in support of the Shah only reinforced the view that the United States was the little primary source of the Persian humiliation. The Bush neoconservatives dominating the NSC policy formulation process viewed Iran with the same lens they viewed al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and Saddam Hussein. Americans have a short attention span. The administration responded to Iran through the context of 1979, yet few consider that most Iranians still viewed America through the events of 1953. The regime change was a wrong policy for Iran. The militarized foreign policy approach that the administration that thought worked so well in Afghanistan and Iraq was not relevant to Iran. As the Bush administration was about to discover, one cannot apply a singular policy to the complexity of the Middle East. The Bush doctrine did just that. Trump is continuing George W. Bush's policy. Mahako wrote on page 52, Iran's response to 9/11 surprised many observers. Spontaneous candlelight vigils in Tehran mourned the American dead. The mayors of Tehran and Isfahan sent condolence messages to the people of New York City, and the Iranians observed a moment of silence before a national soccer match. The Iranian government issued a strong statement condemning the terrorist attacks, and President Khatami publicly expressed his deep regret and sympathy with the victims. During his November visit to the UN General Assembly, Khatami went so far to request permission to visit ground zero in order to offer prayers and the light of candle for the victims. 88. And you can read the entire, there's a entire link on here, so you can read this for yourselves. Let me just continue on here. On page 55, at the January 2002 Afghanistan Donors Conference in Tokyo, Iran pledged $540 million in assistance for a new Afghan government compared to $290 million committed by the United States. While in Tokyo, an Iranian representative approached Dobbins and expressed his desire not to only continue cooperation in Afghanistan, but work on other issues with appropriate American officials. At this same conference, Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill received a similar message from the Iranian government, but Dobbins or O'Neill reported Iran's offer to Rice and Powell, but no reply was given to Iran. Later, during the March 2002 meeting in Geneva, the Iranian delegation met again with Dobbins and offered military assistance to house and train up to 20,000 Afghan troops under the American-led effort. Dobbins relayed his offer to the administration, but Powell deferred the issue to Rice, who deferred the issue to Rumsfeld. Days later, the issue was on the agenda for discussion at an NSC Principals Committee meeting. During the meeting, Dobbins relayed Iran's offer, but Rumsfeld ignored the issue and no one else seemed interested. On page 59, in October 2001, Flint Leverett, Middle East expert for the Department of State Policy Planning Staff, was responsible for developing a strategy to address the offers of support from Syria, Libya, Iran, and other troublesome nations. Leverett's proposal to Powell was basically a quid pro quo engagement. If these countries agree to expel terrorist groups and cease efforts to acquire weapons of mass destruction, the United States in return will normalize relations. In December, when his policy proposal came up for discussion at NSC Deputies Committee meeting, chaired by Deputy National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley, as well as a representative from the Vice President's Office of the OSD, rejected the idea. See, you see what's been going on right now, right? It's like they want to offer assistance, and other side is ignoring them, okay, and doing anything to deprive them from opportunity. Then Mexico stated the Pentagon was already exploring options for regime change in Tehran. Furthermore, Israel and Pakistan were also alarmed about the increased cooperation between Iran and the United States. On page 65, Mexico quoted from President Bush's State of the Union address on 20th January 2002. Our second goal is to prevent regimes that sponsor terror from threatening America or our friends and allies with weapons of mass destruction. Some of these regimes have been pretty quiet since September 11th, but we know their true nature. North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving the civilians. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming the threatening the peace of the world. Clearly, the U.S. is set upon conquest. First, Afghanistan was invaded, then Iraq, then Libya, then Syria, all of them destroyed and radicalized, which the U.S. started in Afghanistan back in 1979. Perhaps Iran will be next. What is the point of anyone's trusting a government like that? Mexico's report ignored the fact that the Islamic world is split between Sunnis led by Saudi Arabia versus the Shiites led by Iran, and that the Saudis desired to exterminate all Shia. It was back at least to 1744, compact between Muhammad ibn Saud and Muhammad ibn Wahab. Okay, so interesting. Hopefully folks get that there, which formed Saudi Arabia in a compact of hate. Mexico's report ignores the crucial alliance between the U.S. and the Saudi family. Mexico ignores that the U.S. co-founded Al-Qaeda along with the Sauds in 1979 in order to conquer Russia with the American atrocity hate and conquer Iran with the Saudi atrocity hate. But compared to what most American officials and military intelligence operatives and scholars write about Iran and the nations that they are friendly toward it, Mexico's paper was remarkably honest, so it's cited here. The U.S. government has and hides massive reams of rock-solid evidence that the leader of the Saud family, which is the royal family who owned all of Saudi Arabia, not only were the top funders of Al-Qaeda and other 9/11 attacks, but continue afterward being the world top funders of not only Al-Qaeda, but only of many of the other jihadist groups that accept and follow Al-Qaeda leadership. If Trump were sincere, then he would instead publicly expose the fraud that U.S. foreign policy had been based upon, and he would expose his historical record, which proves that the U.S. should be protecting Iran and its allies from the Saudi-led fundamentalist Sunni war against Iran and against all of the world except Sunni-allied Israel and except Sunni-ruled countries. Russia and China and India would then become also U.S. allies and possibly of a globe-annihilating nuclear world war. World War III would immediately plunge. Hundreds of trillions of dollars that will otherwise be spent on preparations for World War III would then go instead toward constructive expenditures. But something prevents American president from doing any such thing as that. Apparently, America's long war to conquer Iran, Russia, and China must go on. No matter what, the 9/11 text kicked it into high gear. First, the U.S. Punished Afghanistan for 9/11. Then the U.S. punished Iraq for 9/11. Then the U.S. court said that Iran somehow was a nation guilty for 9/11. Then the United States president said Iran is the #1 terrorist state. The stage is set, but after an intermission, what will the remaining acts be? The script has been written for what is to come? Does anyone know how the play that started on 9/11 will end? And that can be concluded from evidence thus far is that the Saudis did 9/11 with inside job cooperation from George W. Bush, and that afterward, a country uninvolved in it, Iraq, was invaded and destroyed. Another country uninvolved with it, Iran, has recently become fined for having caused it. And this was originally from the Strategic Culture Foundation. So the article was first appeared there. And Eric Zuzzi's correct in those areas. And you got to give him credit for writing the bigger picture on this. So they say the next step will probably be Iran. And they're going to say that because they were involved in September 11th, because he said, she said, without any evidence, just lip service, like a bunch of little kids go in there and attack them. This is what the parasites want. The people in this country and the people in Iran don't want to fight. And I'm critical with the Iranian government in all the areas, but give me a break. You're gonna build all this up to try to take over Persia. I'll tell you one thing. They will fight. The people there will fight to the death. Iraq tried that. They failed. A lot of terrain in that country. It's not desert. There's a lot of mountains. I know one thing. Those folks know where they both fight in those areas. And I'll tell you this. Anyone who supports this, you go and fight. Let's see how tough you bastards are. And scum queens. I'll give you one thing. They are not responsible for September 11th period. I was saying this with the New World Order agenda, September 14, 2001. I still say it today. You have to really prove me wrong. The 24/7 excuse for everything, 9/11. And President Trump, if you buy it, you're a damn fool, just like the person you're ragging on, Hillary Clinton, and the rest of those clowns that ran for president. Another jackass. You better reconsider. Redeem yourself. And I don't have to say, not my president. I've been saying, not my government. And I'll be back in a moment. Okay. Well, speaking of all that, this came from Chandera Muzavar and actually talks about from the global research.ca came out a few days ago. It says here, Unholy Alliance, Trump, Israel, Saudi Arabia, targeting Iran. We'll continue on here. In the wake of President Trump's visit to West Asia, there even a faint glimmer of hope for peace in the most conflict-ridden region of the world? Or has the visit to Saudi Arabia and Israel from the 20th and 23rd May of 2017 only strained regions' undercurrents of friction and tension? Some reflections of the area of conflict in West Asia may throw a bit of light on the Israeli-Palestinian-Arab conflict, one of the world's longest conflicts. Trump adopted an extremely biased position while mouthing platitudes about Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in harmony. He was effusive in his sympathies for Israelis faced by threats from Palestinians and other Arabs and suffering they have to bear, but was totally silent about the usurpation of Palestinian and Arabs lands, their mass expulsion, and their extermination through acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing pursued by Israel. He appeared obvious to the humiliation and the pressure that Palestinians have to go have to undergo on a daily basis at Israeli checkpoints in the West Bank or in the incarceration of about 2 million Palestinians in the world's largest open-air prison called Gaza. From Trump's words and gestures in Israel, it's obvious that he is working towards a solution that will see Palestinian subsidy in Bundatazans with the whole of Jerusalem firmly in Israel's control, reinforced by settler communities and the West Bank extending jurisdiction over its water resources. Palestinian agents of Israel in the U.S. will be enticed into accepting this arrangement, in which the term will be endorsed by a number of other Arab and Muslim governments keen on pleasing Washington for their own interests. Needless to say, the Bantasan solution will further increase Arabs and Muslims everywhere that will spawn more suicide bombers and prod more youth return to terrorism. Given the current pattern of terrorism in effect will be felt far and wide, with Western cities as special targets. And in addressing other conflicts in West Asia, Trump proved to be equally obtuse. For him, the whole region is confronted by the change of terrorism, which has to be resolved by Muslims themselves, since it is allegedly rooted in misinterpretations of Islamic teachings. Trump and his advisors had looked at the present phase of terrorism and how it had developed. They would have realized that it is linked directly to the Anglo-American invasion and occupation of Iraq. It is because of the act of aggression, overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and the subsequent political events, including the dismantling of the Iraqi army by the occupier, that a sizable number of former soldiers and other Saddam loyalists coalesced into the core of Al-Qaeda in Iraq and launched terrorist attacks against the Shia-led Western Bank government of Baghdad. In other words, U.S. engineered regime change in Baghdad have given rise for the first time to organized terrorism on Iraqi soil. It is significant that Al-Qaeda terrorists in Iraq were funded, equipped, and trained by groups from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey, who, for different reasons, were opposed to the new ruler in Baghdad. As a faction for the Iraqi Al-Qaeda moved to Syria, encouraged by groups in Saudi Arabia to fight Bashar Assad, who was has a Shiite background and is secular. The U.S. elite saw it was an opportunity to advance its own long-standing agenda of ousting Bashar from power, especially since there was already a minor uprising against his authoritarian rule in one small city. Bashar is not only an adversary of Israel, which occupies a large chunk of Syria's strategic Golan Heights. He is also a close ally of both Iran and Lebanon's Hezbollah, two entities which are deeply committed to resisting U.S. Israeli hegemony over West Asia. This is why American and Israeli intelligence, together with the intelligence services of Britain and France, works hand in glove with their counterparts in the region and with religious elites in a few Muslim countries to recruit tens of thousands of people from all over the world to engage in a sort of jihad against the Bashar Assad government. These are the recruits who became part of Daesh, the Jabhat Fadid al-Sham, and other outfits which until recently controlled parts of Syria. Syria is another tragic example of an attempt to effect regime change, which in truth has generated terrorism in the course, brought death and sorrow to tens of thousands of people. There is a third example of an intimate nexus between regime change and terrorism. In October 2011, the U.S. and other NATO members provided aerial cover, while ground forces, including some terrorist groups organized to overthrow the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, were subsequently tortured and murdered. Libya has since plunged into chaos. There is no effective functioning government. As a result of the mayhem, terrorist cells have proliferated. Libya has become a conduit for illegal migrants from North Africa and other parts of Africa trying desperately to escape the turmoil to find sanctuary in Europe. There are also thousands of migrants from Iraq, Syria, and other countries who because of the mess the societies are in, crossed the Mediterranean to Europe in search of shelter and stability. This goes to show that at least three countries, Libya, Iraq, and Syria, regime change is also directly and indirectly responsible for the migration crisis, which I have to agree on. Now, neither migration nor terrorism can be separated from regime change if they choose them, which is not part of Trump's radar screen. None of the Arab or Muslim leaders gathered by Radai listen to Trump had the guts to tell him that the U.S. pursuit of regime change, that its quest for hegemony, has a lot to do with its upheavals that have overwhelmed some of their societies. The U.S. concedes to control and dominate other nations through regime change and invasion and occupation if it wants it to bring terrorism to an end. But it is not just that the U.S. that seeks hegemony through regime change. Israel is also an aggressive advocate of regime change, as demonstrated by its enthusiastic endorsement of the ouster of Saddam Hussein. Indeed, there are analysts who argue that more than the U.S. president at that time, George Bush Jr., it was Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon who wanted Saddam overthrown. Similarly, an Israeli minister had called recently for the assassination of Bashar Assad. One regime change is on a number of other issues. There is tremendous convergence of goals and perspectives between the U.S. and Israel. But for both instant regards, Hamas, the Palestinian resistance movement, which commands the support of a huge percentage of Palestinians, and Hezbollah committed to the liberation of Arab lands from Israel, and Zionism as terrorist organizations. See, it's like a ping pong ball here, table tennis. Trump reinforced that view during his recent visit to West Asia. Trump has also demonstrated the U.S. is really converged on Iran, both regarded as Iran as a sponsor of terrorism, supporting the liberation movement such as Hezbollah is not the same as concluding with Daesh or Al-Qaeda. It is important to note that the last of so many years, not a single Iranian has been involved in any of the terrorist attacks in West Asia and North Africa, or WANA, or in Europe, or North America, or in no other parts of the world. In fact, leading terrorist groups such as Daesh and Al-Qaeda are anti-Iran and anti-Shia. Most of them are Sunni. Iraq, as in Syria, Iranian militias are battling Sunni terrorist outfits. The irony is that in Iraq, Iranian militias are cooperating with the U.S. in the bid to defeat Daesh terrorists in Mosul. And it's obvious from all this that's an attempt by Trump and Israel to smear Iran with a terrorist brush does not stand up to scrutiny. Neither does their attempt to concoct fear among Iran's neighbors about its nuclear program. Agreement that Iran entered with the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council and Germany, P5+1 group, in 2015 called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, ensures that Iran will never be able to produce a nuclear weapon. In any case, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has openly proclaimed on a number of occasions that manufacturing nuclear weapons is haram from an Islamic perspective. The question of Iran's nuclear program exposes Israel's hypocrisy. Why is it so perturbed by Iran's nuclear program, whose peaceful intent has been verified over and over again by UN inspectors, when Israel is the only state in the region that has nuclear weapons arsenal of perhaps at least 200 warheads? Israel's obsession with Iran's nuclear program stems from its desire to maintain a nuclear weapon monopoly in West Asia. Trump also revealed in the course of his visit that U.S.-Israeli convergence was enhanced by similarities they share with Saudi Arabia. On terrorism and Iran's nuclear program, all three are on the same page. Most of all, they are totally united in their view. But the greatest threat to peace and stability in the region is Iran. Iran is their moral foe. The big conference in Riyadh has brought together heads of state or government or their representatives from 55 countries, was in a sense to convince all of them that Iran is also their greatest enemy. Saudi empathy towards Iran has certain history behind it. It became pronounced after the Islamic Revolution in Iran of 1979, which overthrew a feudal monarch, Shah Pahlavi. Pahlavi, yeah. Before that, Saudi rulers and Shah enjoyed good relations, partly because both paid obeisance to the same overlord, namely the U.S. revolutionary Iran under Imam Khomeini, was clearly opposed to U.S. and Western imperialism and saw Islam as a religion of justice and human dignity that championed the oppressed. Faced with the revolutionary interpretation of Islam, the Saudi rulers were concerned with preserving their feudal power and perpetuating their ties with the U.S., whom they saw as a protector of their home. Besides, they learned towards a brand of Islam, Wahhabism, which part of the Puritanism was also antagonistic towards the Shia sect, the sect of the vast majority of Iranians. This explains to some extent why the Saudis got together with the Gulf monarchies and goaded the ambitious Saddam Hussein of Iraq to go to war against Iran in 1980. It is estimated that millions of lives were lost in that 8-year war. After the pain of the war was receded into the background, relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran improved somewhat. However, this began to change when the Shia majority in Iraq came to power through the ballot box in December 2005 following the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. The Saudis viewed Shia ascendancy in Iraq as benefiting Iran as an expansion of the Shia power in their neighborhood. You see what's going on here. They want the Saudis and the Israelis want things their way. Then in 2006, the Shia Hezbollah thwarted the Israeli attempt to gain control over Lebanon, which boasted Hezbollah standing among the entire Arab population, much to the dismay of the Saudi elite. When the Arab uprisings began in 2010 and spread to places like Bahrain, which is 70% Shia, the Saudi elite became even more determined to maintain its grip upon the region and moved quickly to crush the popular movement for human rights. In Yemen, the legitimate government of the day facing a popular challenge, a significant segment which comes from Houthis, who happen to be Shia. The Saudi elite is involved in extensive military operations to shore up the position of President Mansour Hadi, and of course, it has committed some serious human rights violations which have tarnished its image, and the ability to oust President Bashar al-Assad after 6 years has also frustrated the Saudi elite. The frustration of the Saudi elite, endangered by the apparent rise of Iranian Shiite power, were further compounded by the reluctance of former President Barack Obama to curb Iran. This was how the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also felt about Obama, giving loud enthusiastic support for the nuclear deal. This is why both the Saudi King Salman and Netanyahu welcomed the arrival of Trump and Radi in Tel Aviv with such joy. It is in this context that one should view Trump's arms deal with Saudi Arabia, worth $350 billion over 10 years, with a nearly $110 billion to take effect immediately. The package of defense equipment and service supports the long-term security of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf region in the face of the malign Iranian influence and Iranian-related threats. U.S. military assistance to Israel also runs into billions, and it is a constant feature of their bilateral relations. The common aim of both military aid programs is crystal clear. It is most concrete achievement of Trump's visit to West Asia was to forge a U.S.-Israeli-Saudi alliance against Iran. It can only be described as a bane upon peace. Given the friction and tension that already exists, it could lead to open intra-regional conflict with Israel and Saudi Arabia on one side, supported by the U.S. and Iran, and the other backed by Russia. In such conflict, a strong sectarian dimension, specifically a Sunni-Shia divide, could also emerge. And if the grand sellout of Palestinian rights occur at the same time, with all its dire consequences, all hell will break loose. This is why global citizenry should be focused on what is unfolding in West Asia and act now. This is, you have to look at it in a real big picture. The main goal is to scapegoat Iran for a little bit of everything and saying they're the terrorists, they want to blow up Saudi Arabia and leave Mecca and another holy city alone. But it's okay for Saudi Arabia to bomb the hell out of Yemen, murdering innocent kids, men, women, and children, civilians, non-combatants. And it's okay for the U.S. to supply them all this weaponry. Look at the bigger picture, my friends. Include Israel in this as well. You got a lot of neocons out there going, God bless Israel, Israel, Israel. Like, you know what? You better read your damn Israeli basic law. A lot of them don't have rights. They have privileges. Especially on property rights. I talked about that last time. You can look it up, too. Just another damn excuse to benefit the military-industrial complex. The neocons, their shareholders, and all these douchebags that have bloodlust for the land of the Aryans. I boldly condemn this with a passion. I am not going to hold back on it. Can this lead to blowback? Innocent people from the other side, the enemy's territory? Absolutely. CIA and Pentagon, they're all behind this. They control their oil fields once again, and their natural resources. So let's scapegoat that country. It's downright nefarious. I don't care if you get offended by it or not. If I criticize the Israeli government, and never ever label me as anti-Semitic, because what they're doing is anti-Semitic. And I'll be back. Okay, enough of that. With all due respect. Then, I say no war with Iran or anyone else. I'm already against the next war. Next government, next president, next Congress, and all that. Hopefully you feel the same. Okay, let's just do something here a little bit more. This one here is pretty domestic. By Tech Dirt. And it came out yesterday. Yeah, it came out yesterday. Congress fast-tracks bill that will give NHS agencies access to NSA collections. To read here, as a parting gift to incoming President Barack Obama approved information sharing rules which gave 16 federal agencies access to unminimized NSA collection. The whole list of agencies involved in the information sharing can be found at the ODNI's website, which is Office of the Director of National Intelligence website. Two independent agencies in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Intelligence Agency, the CIA, 8 departments of defense elements, the intelligence, the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, National Security Agency, NSA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, and the intelligence elements of the 4 DoD services, the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force. 7 elements of other departments and agencies, the Department of Energy Office of Intelligence and Counterintelligence, the Department of Homeland Security's Offices of Intelligence and Analysis, and the U.S. Coast Guard Intelligence, the Department of Justice's Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Drug Enforcement Agency's Office of National Security Intelligence, the Department of State Bureaus of Intelligence and Research, and the Department of the Treasury's Office of Intelligence and Analysis. Yes, the collective communications can be masked to protect the identities of U.S. persons, but that call is made on a case-by-case basis by the NSA, and there are several government officials with the power to demand unminimized access. This isn't just enough sharing. Apparently, Patrick G. Eddington of Cato reports a new bill is being quickly and quietly pushed through the House to expand its sharing to several more federal agencies. Introduced on April 26 by Representative John Katko, Republican from New York, the Improving Fusion Center's Access to Information, H.R. 2169, is designed to plug any information gaps in state fusion centers by modifying the Homeland Security Act of 2002 to require DHS to identify federal databases and data tests, including database and dataset used, operate, or managed by the department components, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Department of Treasury that are appropriate in accordance with federal laws and policies to address any gaps identified pursuant to paragraph 2 for the inclusion in the information sharing environment and coordinate with the appropriate federal agency to deploy or access such databases and data sets. DHS is already on the list of agencies with access to NSA collections. This bill would allow it to give underlying agencies access to the same information. Some notable three-letter agencies on that list include CBP, ICE, and TSA. While the NSA's collections are supposed to have a national security purpose, the FBI uses access for standard criminal investigations. There's no reason to believe these agencies won't do the same. But the bill has friends everywhere in the House. The bill passed after 40 minutes of debate, thanks to a suspension of normal voting rules. The normal concerns for national security were voiced. Nothing was said of NSA's collection routine used in routine domestic criminal investigations. Now, Congress considers expanded information sharing with domestic security agencies non-controversial. The hence sped-up voting process is an indication of the majority's views of privacy security balancing act. Worse, if the bill becomes law, the worst, most ineffective parts of the DHS will be given access to data and communications gathered by the NSA. Fusion centers, which are already known for being mostly useless, when not actively doing damage to constitutional rights, will have even more information to misuse. The bill would give bicycles to fish in all 50 states. The only thing guaranteed new powers will be used badly. Eddington's quote from a 2012 report from the Senate Homeland Security Committee, which found DHS fusion centers to be expensive, useless, and harm to the public. The Department of Homeland Security estimated that it spent somewhere between $289 million and $1.4 billion in public funds to support state and local fusion centers since 2003. Broad estimates that differ by over $1 billion. The investigation found that DHS intelligence officers assigned to state and local fusion centers produced intelligence of uneven quality, oftentimes shoddy, rarely timely, sometimes endangering citizens' civil liberties and the Privacy Act protections, occasionally taken from already published public sources, and more often than not unrelated to terrorism. This is where the NSA's collection will ultimately end up, in the hands of DHS branch officers to do little more than repeatedly screw up. But only now they'll be able to do significantly more harm to American civil liberties, and that to the routine clusterfuck that is the CBC, ICE, and TSA and you have a recipe for massive Fourth Amendment violations on the pretense of national security. That's right, government, the haters of freedom, parasites of society, mind-controlled horror bags that they are. What else I can say? Piss your money away in the name of security, which is nothing more than a wet dream. And it's a real shame with some of these asswipes in the House did a voice vote. 40-minute debate. What have they been doing? Spreading their butt cheeks to the oligarchs? I wouldn't be surprised. All bunch of peeping Toms. Uncle Toms to the oligarchs. And Aunt Jemimas as well. Well, the states can get rid of these fusion centers by shutting their water off. And you know what? Get them where it hurts. Why not? Hey, if I'm dumb and incompetent, can I work for Homeland Security too? Yeah, why not? Yeah, I have a mind of a turnip. You're in. Congratulations. That's what they're saying here. Totally useless. This is why the war in this sham. The war on terror is a conflict with its people. Anyone please prove me to be incorrect? Hope I dare you. But another deception moves on. Ooh, sorry about that. Getting a little bit yawny here. And I know it's a little bit over the limit. Usually I do an hour max. However, I had a few articles I really want to check on here. And take a little breather. Be back. Beep, boop, boop. All right, cool. Finally, I want to do one more article. Came from Phil Davison. This is from the Indifferent. .co.uk. It's entitled Manuel Noriega, Obituary. Panama dictator worked with CIA while murdering political opponents. I'm not shocked. Disgrace from former Panamanian General Manuel Noriega was a ruthless dictator, domestic spook, convicted murderer, money launderer, big-time drug runner for the Colombian cocaine drug lords, and a double agent for the CIA and Fidel Castro's Cuba. Some of his friends, however, including English ballerina Dame Margaret Fontini, he was a lovable rogue in the 1980s when he was nicknamed Pineapple Face because of severe acne. He stood up to the U.S., but went one step too far when he swung for a machete around his head and declared Panama is in a state of war with America. Not great timing. For one thing, the major U.S. networks filmed the machete incident, which was never going to go down well with U.S. President from Texas, George Herbert Walker Bush. New World Order was more another anti-U.S. dictator. Iraq's Saddam Hussein was in a dispute with neighboring Kuwait and was building up forces with a possible view of invasion, which he did following the year 1990. Bush did not fancy taking on two dictators at the same time. Just before Christmas 1989, he ordered U.S. paratroopers into Panama. Within 2 weeks, Noriega surrendered. The $300 million Noriega was said by U.S. investigators to have amassed as his personal fortune became useless. He was convicted in the U.S. for drug trafficking, racketeering, and money laundering in 1992 and was sentenced to 40 years in prison in Miami, later reduced to 30. In the end, he was released early by the U.S., but only because both France and Panama had called for his extradition on other charges. But the U.S. was happy to get rid of him and see him complete his penance elsewhere. He was shipped to Paris in 2010 and sentenced in July to 7 years in jail for money laundering by buying luxury Paris apartments with drug proceeds worth $3 million like the U.S. However, France have administered their own justice, releasing this over a year. in September 2011 and put him heavily guarded on a plane to his native Panama when he arrived on 11 December that year. If Noriega was expecting a triumphant welcome home from his former supporters, it was not to be. Panama jailed him for 20 years. But they gave him the middle finger, I would say, right? Oh, my, oh, my, oh, my. Okay, I'm going to continue on here. In the early 2017, he was released from prison for a temporary period of house arrest that allowed him to have an operation to remove a benign brain tumor. In early March, he was said to be critically ill and then in a coma after suffering a hemorrhage. Doctors decided to attempt the further surgery to treat the cerebral bleeding, but he died on late Monday local time in Panama City Santo Hospital, with the Secretary of State for Communication, Manuel Dominguez, announced he was 83. For a foreign correspondent covering Panama in the 1980s, Noriega was pure gold. Panama rarely got covered in Europe, but Cara de Pena, Pineapple Face, guarantees headlines. Charismatic, he was not. Fascinating, yes. Kind of Donald Trump of his time. Noriega did not like foreign reporters, even Panamanian reporters, except the one that he paid off with cash in U.S. dollars. These were pre-Twitter days, so his only resource was to invite us foreign correspondents to his bunker-style office at the Panamanian Defense Force headquarters. Like Trump, he was convinced he was the best thing ever to happen for his country, and that, of course, he was soon proved wrong. One of his major mistakes in the 1980s was to order the execution of one of his outspoken opponents, Hugo Spadafora, a handsome, charismatic man who had uncovered Noriega's collaboration with the Colombian drug lords Pablo Escobar and Carlos Leder, and getting massive amounts of cocaine to the U.S. Spadafora's body was found in the U.S. Postal Service mailbag. His head was been sawn off with a butcher knife and was never found. Noriega was in Paris at the time of Spadafora's murder, but an intelligence wiretap between one of the Panamanian commanders, Luis Cordoba, and Noriega read, "Cordoba, we have the rapid dog. Noriega, and what does one do with a dog that has rabies?" Then Noriega hung up. In May 1989, during the election that was meant to put Noriega's man Carlos Duque in power, pro-Noriega hoodlums, ironically known as the Dignity Battalions, took the streets of Panama to intimidate opponents. It was a normal occurrence, but this time, two American photographers, Redstone and Ron Haviv, happened to be present. They photographed opposition candidate Guillermo Billy Ford being beaten with iron bars by Noriega's men. Haviv photos of Ford being beaten, his white Gabarilla shirt drenched in blood, hit the cover of Time magazine on 22nd of May, 1989. President George Herbert Walker Bush could not help but take note. On 20th December 1989, Bush launched Operation Just Cause without warning. Some of 27,000 American troops landed. 23 of them died, and hundreds of Panamanians, most civilians, were killed in crossfire. The Panamanian Defense Forces headquarters, where I had met Noriega years before, was virtually leveled. The U.S. forces surrounded and fired upon the Marriott Hotel, where the foreign correspondents were staying. Fashion photographer Juan Rodriguez, working for El País, was shot dead by an American soldier, and the famous image of Jadot lying dead with his camera by his head still haunts American correspondents and photographers to this day. American forces also shot and wounded an English photographer. For 2 weeks, Noriega hid out in the residence of the Papal Nursino, the Vatican ambassador, Monsignor Juan Laboa, where he was untouchable for diplomatic reasons. That meant the U.S. forces could not shoot him out, so American troops used a different approach. They brought out massive loudspeakers of high constant proportions that bombarded the Vatican embassy with sound, non-stop rock music, day and night, with the gleam with some glee, Americans, including the U.S. Navy SEALs, rely on mostly songs by The Clash. I Fought the Law and the Law Won. Even from the way behind the loudspeakers, the noise was horrendous. Noriega, after the mediation with Massimo Laboa, finally emerged on 3rd January 1990 and an operation known as Nifty Package. He was flown to the U.S. and the rest is history. Manuel Antonio Noriega Moreno was born in 1934, although some biographies edited by him claim he was born 4 years later. In the working class El Chorro district of Panama City, where he later made his base. His father was a Mexicano who had immigrated from Colombia. His father's housekeeper, Noriega, was a mix of Spanish, Amerindian, and African origin, and his Moreno dark eyes ensured him of peasant and working class support in a country dominated by the so-called Rebelancos, or whitetails, the economic elite of many Spanish ancestry. So you could say he was a mulatto. He was a mixed breed. At the age of 5, Noriega was given up by his father for adoption to a woman school teacher. The boy hoped to become a doctor, but lacking resources, ended up as a cadet in the Peruvian Military Academy in Lima. After joining Panama's National Guard in 1967, he was sent for training at the re-owned School of the Americas in Fort Benning, Georgia, notorious for turning out some of Latin America's most ruthless dictators, including Chile's Augusto Pinochet. By the late 1970s, Noriega had become something of a prestige of Panama's military strongman leader, Omar Torrijos. When Torrijos died in an unexplained plane crash in 1981, fingers were pointed at Noriega. Wherever the case, Noriega became a new strongman, and by the time he took formal power in 1983, Noriega was much like a key asset of the CIA. In return for payments whose amount may never be known, he helped get weapons, U.S. weapons, military equipment, and cash to anti-communist forces in Central America, including U.S.-backed Contras fighting against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. He allowed the U.S. to set up listening posts in Panama aimed at monitoring the leftist Sandinistas in Nicaragua, who were also channeling U.S. money and weapons to the anti-Sandinista Contras. By then, the CIA knew he was helping Colombian drug lords ship cocaine to the U.S., but they turned a blind eye in return for his help. By the time the Americans saw halting communism as more important than stopping cocaine entering the country, their country now proven to be a major mistake. Noriega's influence in Central America's civil wars was seen as a more important than damage cocaine was increasingly causing the streets of the U.S. But the CIA did not initially know that Noriega was also dealing with Fidel Castro in Cuba and with the left-wing insurgencies in Nicaragua and other Central American countries, providing them with weapons but neglecting to put the proceeds to Panama coffers. He began to get quite rich as a result of his wealth and power. He quickly won new friends. He already befriended the English ballerina Dame Margaret Verdun, who lived in Panama City with her husband, Dr. Roberto Arias. During Noriega's rise through the ranks, Dr. Arias was a Panamanian politician and diplomat, as well as suspected guns and whiskey smuggler and serial womanizer, who was shot by a political or love rival in 1964. Tito Arias, a graduate of St. John's College, Cambridge, remained a wheelchair-bound quadriplegic until his death in 1989, tended by that time by Dame Margaret and his family. Dame Margaret recalled once sitting in her Panama City home, the beaming Noriega jumped up from behind the sofa and wielding a pistol. It was a pineapple face's idea of a joke, but it didn't go down well with Dame Margaret, who kicked him out. Dame Margaret died of cancer in Panama City in 1991, by which time Noriega was behind bars in Miami. Manuel Noriega's wife, Felicia was rarely seen in recent years, but she believed to survive him along with her daughters Lorena, Sandra, and Thace. So Manuel Antonio Noriega, born on 11 February 1934, died 29th May 2017. Very interesting. Yes, the man has a lot of rough edges. He played some double dealing. He really had an interesting childhood. His father left him and all that. So I know that did take a toll of the human spirit. So he was a real cloak and dagger character. Try to be friends on both sides. Well, the whole war on drugs is a sham anyway in the United States. It should be shut down. But problem with Manuel Noriega, he exposed himself too much and got caught. Oh, like I said, another asset down the drain. Just wonder how many people have suffered under his hand. So I'm not going to say he's a love loss for me, as far as I'm concerned. But life goes on, my friends. You always got to choose your destiny wisely. Don't follow the hoopla and hype like this individual did. And that is it. I thank everyone for listening to the show. Plus, feel free to download and share the social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to send me something that's interesting, wherever you do, please address your correspondence with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Streams Network, Scene.life, Minds.com, FutureNet.club, and Patreon.com. I hope I had everything correct. Or not, just type in Loki Luck 3, give me other search engines and all that. In addition, you can email me at LokiLuck3, which is number 3 altogether, at gmail.com, or to encrypted types, LokiLuck numbers 03 altogether at protonmail.com. Yep, this is a little bit longer than I usually do it, but sorry about that. Hopefully you enjoy the show. Once again, thank you for your time, but always remember that the demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.